All right, guys, we're going to jump into the answers for CFA 4.9 to 4.11, where we're dealing with inequalities. So again, on your hard copies, be making sure you're listening here and writing down the answers and deepening your understanding in these concepts and trying to figure out some of the things that you might have missed on the quiz. Okay, so number one, we're going to match the number sentences to the statements below. So we've got our inequalities over here with our statements. So let's draw some matching lines here. Okay, any number that is more than 9. Remember, when it says any number, there's your variable. So we'll call it x, and it is more than 9. So x has to be more. It can't be equal to it. So x is greater than 9. Okay, the second one, any number that is not equal to 9, and we know this is the not equal sign we've learned. So any number that is not equal to 9. The third one, any number that is at least 9. Okay, so if it's at least 9, okay, it can be exactly 9, so that's where the equal to part comes in, but it can also be greater, any number that is at least. So it's bigger or exactly 9. That's that one. And the last one is any number that is at most 9. So again, it can be 9 exactly, but it can be less than 9 too. Okay, so that would be x, any number is less than or equal to 9. Okay, so make sure you get these lines drawn. And again, pause the video if you need to anytime during this. And I'm going to erase here and move on. Okay, number 2. We've got a couple up here where we're supposed to describe the solution set in words. We're going to figure out what's going on here. And then how do we graph these inequalities? So to describe this, t is greater than -2. Always say it first. T is greater than -2. So when we describe it, we know t can be any number is how we say that. So we would say any number greater than -2. Any number greater than -2 would make this true. So to graph that, I need to show every possible answer. There are infinite answers here, so how would I show that graphing? Well, it's got to be greater than -2. So I'm going to find -2. And remember, if it's not going to equal it, if it's got to be greater than, we have to start marking on -2 because that's where we start. But we don't fill it in because that would mean if we filled it in, that is included in the answer. And in this case, -2 is not included. Okay, but any number greater than -2, we know this way is greater. So then we can just make our arrow towards that way, and every number that way, the answers are infinite, would make this true. Whether it be -1.5 or 1 or 2, infinite forever in those, all those would be greater than -2. Okay? Some of you sometimes like to put your circle over here because you say -2 doesn't work, but don't forget all the fractions and decimals in between there that would make it true. So that's why we start on the -2 with that open circle. Okay, the second one here, z is less than or equal to 4. Okay, so in this case, we would say z can be any number less than or equal to 4. Okay, so a little bit different than the first one because this one has to be less than or equal to it exactly, because we know that's what this means here. This is less than or equal to. So that means 4 actually works. So when I go to my graph, I put a dot on the 4, and I know any number less than or equal to, so it's equal to -4 and anything, to 4, and then anything less than. So we put our arrow that way. All of those answers forever, infinite answers, would make this true for z. So again, notice we have the open circle here because it's greater than that. Here is less than or equal to. If it's going to be equal to it, then you have to shade it in and say that answer is included. Okay, so again, make sure you get these written down. Okay, and then you guys on your back side of the page, we've got one more to look at here. All right, so in this case, we're supposed to look at some inequalities in a real-life situation. So many trainers believe one should exercise for up to 80 minutes each session. So to define a variable, remember that's what can vary, what can change in this situation. In this case, it's the minutes of exercise. So for my variable, let's just say, let's call it m for minutes exercising, because that's what can vary. Okay, so how do we say this with inequalities? Represent this statement. What does M have to be? What do trainers believe? Okay, so in this case, they think their minutes of exercise said they should exercise for up to 80 minutes, which means it could be less than 80 minutes, okay, but it should be less than or equal to 80 minutes. Okay, your minutes exercise should be less than or equal to 80, because you can go for up to 80 minutes to 80 minutes exactly, so it could equal, but at the same time, for up to that means it should be 80 or less, not greater than that, okay? This is where it gets a little tougher though, because you got to kind of think about some constraints. We need to add more than that, because we can't exercise negative minutes, or even 0 minutes you can't exercise. So I'm going to add another one, so at the same time, M. Now I know M has to be greater than 0 minutes, because you can't have negative minutes that you exercised, okay? So yes, we're going to go, it has to be less than or equal to 80, but at the same time it has to be greater than 0. And guys, with this M being greater than 0 for your minutes exercised, you could have maybe chosen a different constraint here, okay? Maybe we'd say, maybe a trainer would say it would be 20 minutes to 80 minutes. So maybe we could put this as 20. Because really, if you're exercising for 1 minute, they're probably going to recommend you go a little more than that. But they don't really give us that information here. So I'm just going to use M is greater than 0 because we can't have negative minutes of exercise. So to graph that, I go to 80 minutes. And I'm going to put it's up to 80 minutes. That can be exactly 80 minutes. So I filled it in. Okay, so 80 minutes is included. I'm going to put an open circle on the 0 because in this case, it has to be greater than 0. You can't exercise 0 minutes. Okay, it's got to be greater than 0 minutes. So we start at 0, and then so you could exercise anywhere between that 0 all the way up to 80 minutes is what trainers believe that you should exercise in a day. They don't think you should exercise more than that, and obviously we can't go less than 0. That's why we set that constraint. So again, this is just one example of a real-life inequality and how that would look when you're graphing it. So again, make sure you get these things written down and deepening your understanding of these concepts we've been studying.